So I started a new company with no outside investors, no directors, and no one else in charge. Grew it organically with no capital. From zero to a $40 million business, sold it for $151 million in 2016, 77 times EBITDA, and then took all the methodologies for growing and scaling businesses without money.
My name is Kevin David, and if you want real financial freedom for yourselves and for your loved ones today, then the time is now. And I will be there to help you every step of the way. What is up, guys, and welcome back to another exciting episode of your favorite or soon-to-be favorite podcast, The Kevin David Experience. Today we have a very special guest, but before we get into that, like always, thanks to everybody who has been leaving us reviews on iTunes, leaving us comments, and engaging on the YouTube channel, because we actually just started launching the podcast on YouTube también, so I really appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. So today we have Brandon Dawson joining us from sunny Florida as well. And Brandon, the first question that we ask everybody is to describe your entrepreneurial journey all the way up until right now in 60 seconds or less.
Well, I left my job at 26 with a newborn and a 3-year-old, decided I wasn't going to be one of the old guys working in the big firm, and started my own business. Took it public when I was 29 as a 2.4 GPA high schooler. Everyone said it couldn't be done. That business was private equity backed. They ended up selling it out from underneath me, pissed me off, so I started a new company with no outside investors, no directors, and no one else in charge. Grew it organically with no capital. From zero to a $40 million business, sold it for $151 million in 2016, 77 times EBITDA, and then took all the methodologies for growing and scaling businesses without money. Partnered with Grant Cardone, now we're helping thousands of businesses do it through the 10X community.
I love that. That was like one of the best answers I've ever heard. It was like probably actually really close to 60 seconds also. So let's start at the beginning. So you said the private equity back, you took that public when you were, in your late 20s. What was that business? What was that like?
It was probably the most exciting thing I'd ever done. I'd never turned that experience. I wish I had been a little smarter and a little wiser. I would have made an extra couple $100 million, but I made some technical mistakes. And I learned as a young entrepreneur, when you use other people's money, they determine your long-term outcomes. And so I just made the decision I wouldn't allow that to happen. But acquiring hundreds of businesses, franchising 1,000 locations, raising private equity, hundreds and hundreds of presentations to raise the first million, and then the 18, and then doing debt placements. Just as a 2.4 GPA, learning that on the fly, you could never pay for that education. So it was an unbelievable period of time in my life, because I was one of the youngest people ever doing it for the extent of what I did. So I talk about cycles in life. It was 3 cycles earlier than most people would ever get a shot at that. It propelled me into the knowledge and experience I have today.
Yeah, I love that. So I have to ask, because my audience is very technical. Like they like, to being in the weeds, so to speak. You said that if you had known more then, you would have made a couple $100 million extra. What specific mistakes did you make that somebody else might be able to learn from?
I was starting a new business unit to supplement the one I took public, and my private equity guys said, hey, we're not really interested in that business. If you want to set it up on your own and do it, go ahead. And I chose not to do that. I chose to go ahead and leave it in the company. And that business ended up being worth twice as much as the public company, but when they sold the business out from underneath me, I didn't have any ownership interest in it. So I learned that the next time you have a great idea and you have permission to do it on your own and you go with your intuition, sometimes trying to do the right thing leads you to the wrong conclusion. And all I needed to do, because the reason I concluded what I did, is I wanted to take care of my originals that gave me my first few $1 million. Had I just gone to them and said, here's the predicament I'm in, what would you guys want me to do? They would have all told me, set up a new company and give us a little piece of it if you think it's going to be that big. And it would have been that easy of a decision. But I made the decision on my own, thinking I was doing the right things, and I was not seeking guidance and counsel. The theme here is you should all be seeking guidance and counsel from the people that you trust and that are examples to you, and never be trying to make decisions about on your own. And that's the fatal mistake for almost all entrepreneurs. They think they know what's best, and then they take action, and they realize that in reflection it was a bad decision.
So, I mean, so it's like, it's kind of a predicament, right? Because like the people who need the money the most generally are the ones who are the youngest and least experienced, right? Because if they had a lot of experience and success and things like that, then they wouldn't necessarily need to raise the money. Like, what are your opinions about raising money for a beginner, right? Because it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like generally you need money to be able to do big things. You know, most people don't have money when they first start out. Do you think it's worth it to raise money in certain circumstances? And if so, how specifically would you structure it knowing what you know now?
Yeah, so what I would say is there's an alternative to needing money. And that's what we teach at Cardone Ventures. We've had so many businesses that didn't have money make a lot of money and reinvest that money. So the first thing is until you learn how to make money, you'll never know how to. And you got to figure 31 and a half small to mid-sized businesses in the United States, 2/3 of them fail cyclically every 5 years. Wouldn't you want to know that the program you have or the offering or the product or the service had some opportunity to succeed before you went to friends and family and got money? Because that's what usually happens. And it's really hard to raise money when you have no credibility. And so you end up giving up so much of your business. If you happen to have it, you give up so much of your business. I would rather start small, create the example, the prototype, build it bigger, 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 make enough money that I can reinvest in it, and then go big with confidence. And I just see so many entrepreneurs giving so much of their business up on the front end because their enthusiasm and excitement, and they overestimate how big it will be and how valuable, and they give up control and they give up majority of their equity on the front end. And that's what I did, and it was a huge mistake.
Right. And so when you say give up control for people who may not be as experienced as you, like what specifically do you mean by that? And how can you keep control as an entrepreneur if you do end up raising money or bringing on investors, you know, when it is time to go big?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's even examples of major CEOs of massively sized, valuable public companies, like the Papa John's guy, and they've been thrown out of their own business. You know, Steve Jobs is an example of that. So you're never not at risk when you use other people's money. That's the thing I would like to say is, you know, you're always at risk when you use other people's money because they'll have in determining your long-term outcome. I think that most people don't know how to negotiate their own operating agreements when they own 100% of their business with themselves. So negotiating operating agreements with outside investors, what many of them don't realize is that there's mechanisms, technical mechanisms inside of the investment agreement. They're called ratchets, screw downs, step ups, and what happens, they're called PICs, preferred internal calculations, and they don't know what any of those things mean. And so what happens when they miss their numbers or their forecasts, they end up eating up the equity in their business, and that goes to the investors. So you can think you're doing a deal for 20 or 30% of your business. It turns into 2/3 or 90% of your business if you don't hit your numbers.
Right. And so then those specific things you mentioned, those like pickups or clause or all of those things, essentially in one sentence, what that means is if you don't hit your projections, they take more equity to accommodate those missing those projections. And that's kind of buried in a contract that, you know, if you don't have experience, you might not know that that's actually there. And so you think you're giving up a small piece, but you're actually, you know, if you don't perfectly hit your metrics, actually giving up a much larger piece. Is that right?
And I watch that with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million businesses happen all the time. And that really disenfranchises the founders or the owners. You know, they think they're doing a deal, you know, I'm only selling 28 or 32%, I'm going to get all this money and I'm going to blow my business up. And then they don't execute and they end up giving 90% of their business away.
Right. And so the way to do it, if I heard you correctly, is to start smaller, not have to necessarily raise as much by bootstrapping. Once you have proof of concept, then hopefully you'll have access to somebody who can really help you kind of structure it in a way that doesn't have those hidden clauses, where you can maintain, you know, the voting control and the control of your company and not, you know, be at other people's mercy. Is that right?
Yeah, and remember, 2/3 of those businesses will still fail. You're always going to have a partner. The partner might be the bank, the partner is going to be your customers, or the partner is going to be an investor, or it could be all three. So you got to learn to manage all that along with whatever you're trying to do in the business. And I think that most people just don't understand the technical aspect of growing and scaling a business. You know, we reverse engineered 3,800 different businesses across the spectrum, about 100 different verticals, to understand where the businesses break, what happens in consolidation, why didn't mergers or acquisitions succeed, why did they fail, and then we reverse engineered all those what I call the break points. And there is a natural phenomenon that happens in all businesses. And we've proven this now at Cardone Ventures over the last 2 years, because we've literally reverse engineered over 290 businesses across probably 200 different industries now. And they all see the exact same phenomenon. So from 100,000 to 3 million, that's break point 1. 3 million to 8 million, break point 2. Now I understand these are bands, so you could be 2 million or you could be 5 million, but these are bands. So break point 1 is 100,000 to 3 million. Break point 2 is 3 to 8. 8 to 15 is 3. 15 to 25 is 4. 25 to 45 is 5. 45 to 75. 75 to 125. And I can do that all the way up now to $4 billion, because we've gone. In fact, when I sold my business for 77 times EBITDA, we took $1 billion company in 36 months to $4 billion in value principles. So this is something that we're very, very familiar with, and what I can tell you is there's a natural phenomenon, and if you don't know what that phenomenon is, you're going to find yourself backwards, because it's the first 100,000 to 3 million is the what you do. Once the what you do sticks, it's profitable, it works. Everything after that's going to be who you do it with and how you do it. Frictions of that, because the second break point is accumulating people to help you. The third break point is putting process and systems around what you can prove work, because the fourth break point is to create a leadership team that can accumulate even more people to do it accurately the way you know that it needs to be done successfully, and that gets you to about 25 million. And then 25 to 45, it's about what systems you deploy. And it just keeps going up and up and up and gets more and more complicated. So a lot of businesses will hit breakpoint 2 and 3, and then they'll retreat because they'll make technical mistakes. They've increased their overhead. And that's about the time they start looking for private equity or a sale, is when they realize, oh shit, I'm putting everything at risk. I'm making less money. I'm working harder, and I'm scared. And that is the worst time to try to sell.
And it's an interesting, and you're exactly right, obviously, but it's an interesting phenomenon when you're making like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year. You might actually be having more profit and doing less work than when you're at 10 million. And I've heard a lot of people that are kind of growing to those different ratios and kind of discovering those things for themselves. Is there like a book or a resource that you recommend that kind of goes over what you just discussed in more detail?
Yeah, there isn't one, but there will be one, because I'm working on it right now. I'm taking all that research and I'm putting it all into a book so that it can guide people, so they understand how to scale the abyss. They understand that, where businesses go through what's called a devaluation curve is at the top range of each of those breakpoints. It's where they have the maximum amount of cost, the maximum amount of overhead, because they're trying to staff up and hire up to break through to the next level. So they start spending on a lot of things that don't actually add value, which lowers their actual value. And then when they realize they lose their confidence that will work, they retreat. And that's where businesses stay small.
And so the second company in the 60-second intro, I believe, was the Audigy Group. Is that right?
That's right.
And so then you did that one differently than how you did your first, because in the first you said that you ended up losing control and having it sold out.
I raised capital. I didn't raise any money. I didn't borrow any money. Every single month I started the business in October of 2004. I had enough money left for 2 more months to be in business before I generated my first revenue, which was June of 2005. And then I started June 15th, and after June 15th of my revenue cycle, the start of it, I never had a non-profitable month, and I never had a non-profitable quarter for 15 years, and then I sold the business for 77x, 151 million. And in that window, I generated 50 million in profit.
I love that. So can we talk about how you got the idea for that, like how you started getting your first customers and things like that? Because hearing I sold it for 151 million, people's eyes kind of like gloss over, because that sounds so, difficult for most people. So can we talk about kind of the origins of how that came about and how you started it?
Well, I think what's important is I started my very first business. I left my job. I didn't have any money. I had enough money that I had made, because I was making 150 grand a year at 23, 24 selling stuff, and I saved it. I packed up my home and my newborn and my wife and my 2.5-year-old, and we moved to Oregon, and I bought a little teeny tiny house to start over because I had enough money to. I went out and I called on a bunch of business owners that were at retirement age asking, are you thinking of selling your business in the next 1 to 5 years? And I talked to about 75 business owners, and I finally found a few that we'd like to retire like in the next year. And I asked them if they knew how much their business was worth, and they said no. So I showed them the research on what it was worth and said, if I'll buy half your business for what it's worth today, and you can retire now, and then I'll bust my ass and then build it, and in 3 years when we sell it, your other half will be worth a lot more than the whole business today. And I was told no probably 60 or 70 times until I found a guy with a $3 million business that said yes. And then that's what we did, and we parlayed that to a $60 million business, a public company. And so, you don't need money to start. You need technique. You need skills. You need courage. You need ambition. You need to be smart. You need to save enough money that you can afford to live and invest full time and go all in on your dreams and your goals. And so my second business, I just did the same thing. I went out to business owners doing the exact same thing, saying, I'll help you. And that's how I built my business. I didn't actually acquire anybody. I went to business owners that said, do you want to be in business for 10 years and maximize the value of the next 10 years? And the ones that said yes, I said, I'm going to start a management company. I'm going to give you equity in it. I'm not charging you for the equity. It's an exchange for you being loyal. You're going to pay me a management fee, and I'm going to help you build your business and make it worth 3 to 15 times a bit more than it is today. And I want to share in that upside with you. And that exchange, people said, sure, don't have anything to lose. And I told them, if we didn't succeed, you can cancel your agreement and fire me. And I accumulated enough businesses that we grew that thing to 3.5 to 15 times their peer groups in the hearing sector. And then we sold the business, and so it was unbelievably successful. And so, no one ever put any money into it.
And were you aggregating businesses, or did you find one especially enticing from like a business perspective with the Audigy Group, and then you focused on just that one company, grew it much larger?
Well, I just focused clearly on hearing clinics, but it evolved to hearing, allergy, ENT, otology. We started managing big medical groups as well.
That's so interesting. And so you basically took over a pre-existing business. You use your operational skills, sales skills, things like that to just drastically increase the value of it. And then a portion of the business for doing like the kind of general partner work, obviously grew wildly more valuable. And then their original share did as well.
100%, and they were thrilled because they were partners with me, and I had a percentage of them. So we were aligned with the success of the business, and I built the the monetization mechanics to work in a way where they didn't even feel the fees coming to me, because I did it out of what's called gain share. I went into their P&L and said, here's how much you're wasting, reallocate that to me, and I'll give you a better experience that'll create more value. So every one of them was like, well, once we got that deep with them, right? A lot of people said no, and then 8-9 years later they came back and said, we wish we had not made that mistake because their peers, their friends were doing so well. So, you got to be patient in business. You got to stick to your strategy, and you got to know how to make money. And if you can figure those things out, it's a snowball effect. Starts out very small, can be very frustrating, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time if you deliver.
It's so incredible. Like, I've never heard anyone say like structure a business that way. How did you think of that? Did you like read it somewhere? Did you learn it from a mentor of yours? Like, because I mean, that's very creative, and creativity in business is so important.
Yeah, well, so what happened is I started out buying 100 businesses and they weren't working. And so I took the things that I needed the businesses to do when I bought them that they resisted, and I created a little licensing company, and I said, I'm going to buy you if you do these 5 things, but only after. And I had $500 million of deal flow, and everyone converted over to doing those things, and I was making so much money with that and they were too, that they decided not to sell. So it gave me the dichotomy of kind of the rich dad, poor dad. I had read that book, Sharon Lecter, and I was like, wait a minute, this is the experience. It's like a rich mindset versus a poor mindset. So when you can bring value to people and make their success easier, they get more excited about it. So what happened is I was creating so much value with people that were saying they wanted to sell, they stopped wanting to sell. And then the people that I bought wouldn't do the things I asked them to do. So I got into the psychology of consolidation and acquisition. And it's a very oppressive strategic model, right? Because I buy you, I put all this money up, and then I cram down on you to execute because I need to recoup my money. Well, that's not very inspirational. And so that's why so many of them were failing in the late 90s, early 2000s. And Jim Collins talks a lot about this in Good to Great, Great by Choice, and How the Mighty Fall. And I had read those book series, and I realized, wait a minute, there's got to be a different way. If I can go to individual entrepreneurs and add value to them and not for things, but lead them. So that's where I got involved with John Maxwell and learning all his content and books, and eventually ended up all these mentors that I'm mentioning. I started by reading all their books. Fast forward 15 years later, I had the privilege to work with all of them because of the impact that we were creating using their material. And now partnering with Grant Cardone, we're just absolutely 10xing everything.
Right, and that's a perfect transition. So working with Grant has like a very powerful personality. What is it like working with? I mean, you do as well. Do you guys ever have disagreements? Is that a good thing? What's that like?
Grant and I work very well together because there's so much respect. But I always tell people, the best thing I did was decide through using intention statements how to become the best employee a business could ever have. Because when I started international conglomerate, I became an employee. And I remember all those business owners I bought and I told you they would never do the things we wanted them to do and they always everything. I hated that engagement and I disrespected it because you convinced me to buy your business and then you resist everything I tell you I need to do to make it more valuable. So because I hated dealing with sellers, I decided when I sold my business I was going to be either the best employee ever in an organization or I was going to set it up for success and then leave. Well, my 5th year, my contract expires June 31st of this year, and I'm still the CEO of that company, although I haven't physically been on site for a year and a half. Why is this important? Because it goes to answer the question about Grant Cardone. I not only survived, but I thrived. I added so much value to that billion-dollar company that it's worth $4 billion today. And all over the globe, I got to work with their leadership, and I used the influence I had learned from John Maxwell to get things done. I partnered with Grant Cardone. Grant did not ask me to partner with him. I asked Grant to partner with me. Therefore, what people don't realize or understand is when you choose to partner with someone, then you're opting into drafting behind them. They're not obligated to partner with you. You're obligated to be the best partner to them. So going into it with that attitude and with the same attitude that my natural instinct is to be in control and in charge of everything, and structuring something where I was not at risk of losing it because of what happened. So that was our first hurdle, is we were partnering, but I needed to be in control of our entity. Well, we agreed on what that would look like, as I could and could not do. So negotiation is always a part of navigation, right? Once we concluded that, then we hunkered down together and we said, if you take all the great things Brandon knows how to do and all the remarkable things that Grant Cardone knows how to do, how can we work as one team to go out and just absolutely saturate, dominate, and create value for others? And we launched that 2 years ago. And we have never had a single incident where he and I weren't aligned or didn't agree. And because I know my place, the 10X brand is a representation of Grant Cardone. The Grant Cardone brand is Grant Cardone. I opted to put Cardone on my business. I've started 5 businesses, not one of them ever had my name on it. So for those people watching this that are so proud to put their name on things, realize that comes not only with reward, but it comes with an enormous amount of risk and liability too, because it screws up a future sale. It could also, if you train wreck your brand, you're never going back. So Grant had a formidable brand doing remarkable things, and I did my homework, I did my due diligence, I hired the research firm to do research on everything Grant was doing, and it just seemed like such a natural fit. So how do we get along? We get along remarkably. Why? Because there's so much mutual respect, and by the way, I know my place.
Right. Yeah, and I love that. And so, like, in a nutshell, for people who may, not know what Cardone Ventures does, right? You guys raise a massive amount of money from accredited investors, and you guys have, a world-class team that kind of puts that money to work in real estate, right? I mean, you can probably, I'm sure, explain it better.
Cardone Capital has raised Grant Cardone and Cardone Capital has raised more crowdfunding in the last 24 months than any organization or human being on this planet, using strictly his own internal team and social media. It is absolutely unheard of. It's all from it's all from accredited investors, minus one fund we had for unaccredited. And he's managed to raise $550 million, buying over $2.3 billion family, and now we bought an office complex next to the main headquarters here. And again, it's something that no one's ever been able to do because he has been relentless in marketing and presenting his brand and his resources to people for the last 12 years. And he's made one of the largest impacts in the globe doing that. So it's a global name. It's unbelievably respected, well recognized. And the 10X brand with that is something everybody understands. So what we did is he had a sales and marketing business in addition to Cardone Capital. I brought in Cardone Ventures and partnered with him. And what we do is everything between learning how to market your business and learning how to create a sale, all the way through people development, marketing operations, and marketing strategy. So you got strategy, you got operations, and you got execution. We do the we do the strategy piece, they do the execution piece. And then we do the finance piece, we do the people development, we do the strategy piece for business owners, and we take all the research and all the experience and concepts I have and we overlay it onto their business so that they can succeed with less resistance and 10X their life.
I love it. So last question that we ask everyone on the podcast is, if you could go back and talk to 18-year-old Brandon, but you only had enough time to tell him one thing, what would you tell him?
Before you make a decision, learn to ask high-quality questions from people who are actual examples that have done it. The quality of your questions will always determine the quality of your results. Drown out people who don't know what they're talking about. Drown out the drainers and only attract the people who are experienced and are willing to share with you because you're interested in them.
I love that. It's so incredibly true. Brandon, this is so much fun. Seriously, you're such an obviously hyper intelligent person. If people want to learn more about you or they want to learn more about Cardone Ventures, what's the best way to do that and to reach out if you enjoy doing that also?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is Brandon M. Dawson on Instagram. It's just all our links are there, all our current. We're doing stuff all the time. Sometimes I'm in everybody's city. Anybody that watches this, DM me. If you're in our city and we've got events, just ask me how to participate. But we're just looking to make impact with people who want to do something massive.
I love it. Seriously, a lot of fun, Brandon. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show.